April 1864. A man stands alone in a tent drenched by the rain. His hands tremble as he writes an order that will turn 600,000 soldiers into ghosts and save a nation. His name? Ulysses S. Grant. His decision? Total war. No quarter. No mercy. No turning back. But here's what the history books never told you. Grant didn't choose total war out of cruelty. He chose it because he saw something no one else could. A terrible truth that would change not just America, but the very nature of war forever. Bruce Catton, the greatest Civil War historian, spent decades unraveling the secrets of Grant's mind. And what he discovered will shock you. Because Grant's total war wasn't just about winning a war. It was about redefining what it means to be human in the bloodiest century of American history. In the next 35 minutes, you'll discover why a quiet man from Ohio decided to burn the South to cinders, and why that decision still echoes in every modern conflict. This is the story Bruce Catton considered the most important of his career. To understand the monster, you have to know the man. Ulysses S. Grant is a 39-year-old failure. A failed farmer. A recovering alcoholic. A firewood salesman on the streets of St. Louis. According to Bruce Catton, Grant was the man America had forgotten before it even remembered him. But Catton saw something other historians missed. In Grant's humiliation, the deadliest weapon America ever produced was being forged. Not of iron and powder, but of pure determination distilled by failure. Fort Sumter explodes. The war begins. And this forgotten man volunteers. Why? Because, Grant said, the Union must be preserved. Simple words. But Catton reveals that behind that simplicity was a deep understanding of the price of greatness. Fort Donelson, February 1862. Grant faces his first real test. Confederate General Buckner asks for terms of surrender. Grant's reply would change the war forever. No terms except an unconditional and immediate surrender can be accepted. Catton realized something crucial in this moment. Grant wasn't being cruel, he was being mathematical. He had calculated something other Union generals refused to accept, that a war for the soul of a nation cannot be won with niceties. But Catton's real insight comes now. Grant wasn't just learning how to win battles. He was learning how to win a war. And there was a deadly difference between the two. April 6, 1862. Shiloh. 2 days. 23,000 casualties. Grant nearly loses everything. On the first morning, the Confederates attack like an avalanche. Grant's army disintegrates. His own officers plead for retreat. But Grant remains motionless, chewing his cigar, watching, calculating. Catton tells us that in this moment, something died in Grant. His last illusion about war. His last hope that this would be quick and clean. But something was also born. The understanding that winning this war would require more than courage. It would require the willingness to become what his enemies feared most. When they asked Grant if he should retreat, his response would echo through history: retreat? No. We'll attack them in the morning. And Catton reveals why this one sentence changed everything. Grant had realized that the war wouldn't be won by whoever fought the most bravely, but by whoever was willing to keep fighting after bravery no longer mattered. May 1863. Vicksburg. The fortress that controls the Mississippi. Grant has already tried 5 different approaches. All have failed. His generals are exhausted. Washington is losing patience. The press calls him the drunk butcher. But Grant studies maps until his candles burn out. Because he saw something everyone else missed. According to Catton, Grant understood that Vicksburg wasn't just a city, it was a symbol. And symbols, once broken, never fully recover. So Grant does something unthinkable. He cuts his own supply lines. He marches his army into enemy territory with no safety net. "We will live off the land," he declares. Catton called this the moment Grant stopped playing war and started playing chess with life. Because Grant had realized the fundamental truth: to save the Union, he would have to be willing to sacrifice everything, including his own reputation. March 12, 1864. Lincoln promotes Grant to General-in-Chief. The entire Union Army now obeys one man. But Catton reveals the real weight of this moment. Grant didn't just receive a promotion, he received a moral death sentence. Because now every dead soldier would be his personal responsibility. And this is where Catton's genius shines. He realized that Grant accepted this responsibility not despite his humanity, but because of it. Grant knew that if he didn't make these impossible decisions, they would fall on men who couldn't carry them. March 1864. Grant formulates his final strategy. And this is where the concept of total war was born. But wait. Grant's total war wasn't about random destruction. It was about surgical precision applied on a national scale. Catton discovered Grant's real plans. It wasn't just to defeat the Confederate Army, it was to destroy the South's ability to wage war. But more than that, it was to break the South's will to keep fighting. 5 armies. 5 targets. One goal: to make every Confederate realize the war was lost. Not just militarily, but economically, psychologically, spiritually. And from here on out, Grant never looked back. Because he had made the most terrible discovery of his life, that misdirected compassion can be the cruelest form of cruelty. May 5, 1864. The Wilderness. Grant faces Robert E. Lee for the first time. For 2 days, 200,000 men destroy each other in a forest so dense they can't see each other. Grant's army loses 17,000 men. Every Union general before Grant would have retreated. Every previous general had retreated. But Grant orders, "We will march south." Catton called this moment the second the Confederacy began to die. Because Lee, for the first time, realized he was facing something different. Not just another general, but a force of nature. Grant had become what the war demanded: unstoppable. Not because he didn't feel pain, but because he decided that his pain was irrelevant compared to the suffering of a divided nation. June 3, 1864. Cold Harbor. Grant's worst military decision. In 20 minutes, Grant loses 7,000 men. The carnage is so intense that soldiers write their names on pieces of paper before the attack, for body identification. This is the moment that defines Grant forever. And this is where Catton reveals the deepest truth about total war. Grant didn't stop. He didn't retreat. He didn't change his strategy. Why? Because he had understood something few humans can accept, that sometimes doing the right thing looks exactly like doing the wrong thing. Catton shows us that Grant carried Cold Harbor for the rest of his life. But he also carried the conviction that every death would have been in vain if he gave up now. June 1864 to April 1865. The Siege of Petersburg. 292 days. Total war in its purest form. Grant is no longer trying to destroy Lee's army. He's trying to destroy the South's ability to continue existing as an independent nation. Railroads cut. Supplies intercepted. Cities evacuated. Grant had become something America had never seen, a general who thought like an economist and acted like a force of nature. And Catton reveals why Grant never looked back, because he had calculated that prolonging the war would be crueler than intensifying it. That true compassion was in ending the conflict as quickly as possible, regardless of the personal cost. April 9, 1865. Appomattox Courthouse. Lee surrenders. And this is where Grant's genius and Catton's insight shines most intensely. Grant, the man who had become synonymous with total war, offers Lee the most generous terms in American military history. Confederate soldiers can keep their horses. Officers keep their swords. No one will be prosecuted for treason. Why? Catton reveals the devastating truth. Grant had never fought against the people of the South. He had fought against the idea that America could be divided. Total war was not about hate, it was about love. Love for the Union that Lincoln had described as the last best hope of Earth. And in this moment, Grant demonstrates something Catton considered the greatest leadership lesson in American history, that true strength is not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom of knowing when to stop. Catton left us with this eternal truth. Grant chose total war not because he was cruel, but because he understood that there are moments in history when compassion demands cruelty, and peace demands war. And he never looked back because he had learned the hardest lesson of leadership, that sometimes doing good looks exactly like doing evil, and the difference lies in the willingness to carry the weight of that ambiguity. Leaders around the world still face Grant's dilemma. When does compassion demand toughness? When does peace demand conflict? When does doing good look like doing evil? Bruce Catton spent his life studying Grant because he saw something universal in him, the tragedy and glory of leadership in impossible moments. Grant teaches us that great leaders are not those who avoid difficult decisions, they are those who embrace them and carry their consequences with dignity. The next time you face an impossible choice, remember Grant in the rain-soaked tent, trembling as he wrote orders that would save a nation. Because sometimes, according to Bruce Catton, the only thing more terrible than making the difficult choice is not making it. This was the story that changed how we see leadership, sacrifice, and the price of greatness. Next week, we'll discover how Sherman applied Grant's lessons in his march through Georgia, and why Catton considered Sherman even more radical than his commander. This is Bruce Catton's America. And this is the story America needs to remember.